We have to do better at supporting ourselves first and being able to support each other through all of the challenges and all of the changes that we see in the world. And I have a friend who felt like she couldn't take it anymore. She went to the rooftop of her New York apartment and she was about to take her own life, and she couldn't find her phone to text her husband and her child. So she started to look for her phone, and by the time she found her phone, she no longer wanted to do that. She couldn't even entertain the idea. It was outrageous to her that her mind had gone into that dark of a spiral. So I think that's a poignant reminder and an example of, if we can just keep going, not even one more day, one more minute, one more hour.
Second.
Yes, exactly.
The big silence, empowering personal experiences, inspiring compassion, and healing lives. We are no longer silent. We are here.
The big silence. The big silence.
All right, Niyc Pidgeon, welcome to the Big Silence Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, author of One More Day. Obviously, I already did an intro about this, but this conversation is going to be deep and heavy. So, trigger warning? What do you say?
Trigger warning.
Trigger warning. So you're from the UK. You're here in Austin today. You've written many books with Hay House, and your latest one, One More Day. And I would love to open up this podcast with the Pact.
Yeah.
I'll read it for you. The Pact. In August 2014, I was in my car in my hometown of Newcastle, England, holding hands with my friend Sophie. We just left the funeral for our friend Chris, who had died by suicide. Sophie turned to me and said, "We have to make a promise today. We can't let this happen again. This can't happen to another one of our friends." Looking into each other's eyes with tears streaming down our faces, we made the pact. A few years later, our friend Sarah died by suicide. A year after that, a coroner's report determined Sophie had died by suicide too. 3 friends, all of them gone, lost to suicide. While I was giving motivational talks about how to live your best life, I was shattered because of how much Soph believed in the power of positive psychology and was such a supporter of my work. And maybe most of all, because of that wrenching pact we made after Chris's funeral. Her death was the hardest part to process. We'd met as teenagers in Newcastle, bonding over school and nights out. And since then, we dreamed. Sorry, I get emotional like reading
I know,
this.
right?
I'm like, I don't want to make you read this. And since then, we'd followed dreams that took us around the world, but we always cherished the friendships that helped form us, and we spent time together in person as much as we could.
Special, right?
The Pact. That's what inspired you to write your book. One More Day.
Yeah.
And not one more life.
It's needed. It's time.
So when you first got here, and we met through a friend, Amber, first question you got was, why do you spell your name Niyc, Niyc?
Well, it's a great question, and it's very relevant. So when I was 11, I had a childhood suicide attempt myself, and I used to get bullied really badly at school, and it was in sports class. We call it PE. I don't know if it's the same here.
It is.
Yeah. I got bullied really badly in PE because the structure of a normal lesson meant that I could hide and I could just focus on my work. But when it came to Tuesdays, I one day just felt so terrified that I didn't want to go in. And I told the teachers that I was getting bullied. I told my parents, but there wasn't a lot that they could do. And that Tuesday morning, I decided I didn't want to go. I didn't want to be around anymore. And I took all of the medication in my mum's medicine cabinet. And then she ended up finding me, and she called my dad, got him to come home from work. Well, she said, meet us at the hospital. And I was taken out of school, and I was homeschooled for 6 months. And then I went through almost like this identity crisis, or I guess it was a rebuilding of an identity.
Mhm.
And it's funny you ask the question because that's why I changed my name.
So interesting. I don't know if you know, but I'm a 12-year-old suicide survivor.
I did not know that.
I went into my friend's mother's medicine cabinet one night.
Oh my goodness.
It's all in my book as well, but that's the thing that like has to stop, because I grew up in the 90s where no one was talking about it. And why is there any child, any adolescent, any adult who feels that they're so alone that they have to do this? So I don't even know where this conversation can go, because it's such a deep darkness, but I want to shed the light on life. And your wisdom of what you've learned by losing 3 very good friends this way. And so let's start off with why you wrote the book and what is the guide and who needs to read it.
Yeah. And I have worked in the online space and have learned copywriting and marketing. And I know that one of the worst things that you can say is that something is for everyone. But actually, this book is for everyone. And I feel like one of the opportunities we've got is to hold on to the hope that the book and the work brings. And one of the challenges that we face is ignorance and apathy, that this message isn't for you unless you're feeling suicidal right now. I think that's one of the roadblocks that I keep smashing through, honestly, because whether you feel like suicide prevention is aligned with you and your mission and your vision right now, ultimately, like, we have to do better. We have to do better at supporting ourselves first and being able to support each other through all of the challenges and all of the changes that we see in the world. And I didn't think that I would become a positive psychologist that is so passionate and lives and breathes suicide prevention, because positive psychology is the science of happiness. It's the science of how we can become stronger and more successful. But after I lost 3 close friends. There's around 10 to 12 friends that I've lost to suicide who weren't super close. But what we see is this contagion effect that can happen where suicide becomes normalized, and it impacts 135 people for every one person who dies by suicide. What positive psychology teaches and shows is that 135 people are positively impacted when they experience some sort of positive psychology tool or intervention. So when I started to learn about the hopefulness surrounding this conversation, I went from being in this conflict of not understanding why I couldn't save my friends to really feeling activated to save more people, even if they're complete strangers and I don't know who they are or where they are in the world. I know that when we work together and we help ourselves feel better more of the time, we're actually able to create a different way of living and being together in the world.
And I still feel like there is there is a stigma around suicide and talking about it. There's a stigma around mental health and talking about it. And I will note that this is I've had multiple conversations on the podcast about this, but Kayla was interviewed on the podcast in the beginning. The top podcast, there's people that want to listen and be comforted. And her husband was a pastor and had 3 kids. And then there's the impact. Like you just said that in the UK, you had your book launch and had 2 hours of lines, and everybody in that line had something to say. So like you said, everyone is impacted. So how do we make this difference and tell people that you are meant to be here and this too shall pass?
Yeah, knowing that the thoughts, the negative spiral, if it's suicidal ideation or it's just any negative thoughts, knowing that it is temporary makes such a difference. Knowing that, I mean, there's survivor stories in the book where I've interviewed and surveyed people to see what it was that made them keep going for one more day. And I have a friend who, she's like super successful, really strong, really resilient. And she shared a story of during COVID, she felt like she couldn't take it anymore and she no longer wanted to be here. So she went to the rooftop of her New York apartment and she was about to take her own life. And she couldn't find her phone to text her husband and her child. So she started to look for her phone. And by the time she found her phone, she no longer wanted to do that. She couldn't even entertain the idea. It was outrageous to her that her mind had gone into that dark of a spiral. So I think that's a poignant reminder and an example of, if we can just keep going, not even one more day, one more minute, one more hour.
Second.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so let's start this off here with, what could the tools be if you yourself are having those dark thoughts? What is the step for you? And then I want to go into if you have a friend or loved one what the signals are and how you can help.
Yeah. So first of all, don't wait until it gets so bad that you're in a crisis or someone that you love is in a crisis. So the protocol is, if there is a crisis, you call 988, or you text 988, or you call 911, or in the UK, 999. Now, talking helps. The number one protective factor that we have is actually connection. It's belonging, it's being together. But ultimately, we have to resource ourselves first. So it's really easy to think, right, okay, we're on this crusade and we want to save the world, but you've actually got to save yourself first, because unless you're operating from a place of strength and resource, you can't possibly be there for someone else if you're not feeling like you're full up. So first of all, there's no one size fits all approach.
Correct.
This is a complex topic. We are complex people as humans. And there's something in positive psychology that's called a person activity fit. So what I actually invite is trying and experimenting and testing and seeing what it is that feels great. And I have a list. I love the notes section of my phone. Right?
So many notes.
I know.
So many.
So I have lists in there, and there's a list that I put into the book called Tiny Tools. And in my phone, it's like 50 different things that you could do to create a positive shift within your day. And I just invite us all to get clear on what the gateway tools are for us. Because if you're suffering and struggling, you can't think about the big goal or the vision. I know that when I was going through my darkest days, it was hard to think straight, think clearly, and having that list where I could look and I could see, right, okay, I could go for a walk for 10 minutes, or I could play my favorite music. Like, look at, I felt a shift even when we played the music at the start of today's show. I'm like, this is a vibe. Those little small positivity boosters, the gateway, it is a first step that then opens you up to take another step and another step. So the invitation is finding out what it is that works for you. Gratitude practice, breath work, meditation, something that's short and simple. 3 minutes of journaling instead of 30 minutes of journaling. The easiest thing that can help you feel a little bit better. And then we can go from there.
I know everyone thinks whether it's fitness, nutrition, meditation, like it's like this all or nothing thing, where it literally is just a little bit. One more second, 1 minute, do this little thing. We were talking about cold plunging before we started. Oh my God. And if you don't have a cold plunge, cold shower, put your face in the bucket of ice. It shifts me. Like whenever I have anxiety in the morning, Bobby's like, let's go back, get in that cold water, because then you distract your brain. So it's like these little things that can completely shift our mind.
It makes a big difference. When I first started cold plunging, people say, like, how long did you go in for, Nick? And how did it feel? Were you scared? My first cold plunge was 6 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And
Look at you go.
I think I was just in it so much in terms of the way that I was feeling emotionally and psychologically that I almost didn't feel the cold. And looking back, I'm like, whoa, like I must have really been in it then.
Yeah.
But it really helped me because afterwards I felt great. And the more often that I did it, the better that I started to feel. But cold plunging isn't for everyone.
No.
So splashing your face with cold water is a great place to start. And even if you're cold plunging, you can still do that as well.
Yeah. Okay. So then for someone who, like, what are the signs? With your friends, did you see signs?
Yes.
Yes.
And we also intervened. So all three of my friends were struggling with either depression, or for my friend Chris, he was diagnosed with bipolar.
Okay.
And he didn't want to accept that diagnosis. He said, I don't want to be labeled. I want to kind of do this on my own. For my friend Sophie, she was actually a contestant on the reality TV series Love Island. So she was in season 2 of that. And then she came out of the program, and the aftercare on these reality TV shows leaves a lot to be desired. So she had this fame where everybody was her best friend. And I've looked back on the messages that she would send to me, and she'd say, you know, Nick, like everyone's there for the party, and then they disappear, and I like wake up in the morning and I'm on my own. So I think it's that impact of the loneliness that so many of us feel. It's something like 60% of us experience loneliness to the degree that it interferes with our daily activities. So she had this polarization between extreme, intense stardom and having people adore her and want to be around all of the time, and then having no one and not knowing who your friends really are.
That's so interesting. I mean, anyone who has experienced quote unquote fame, whatever it is, and to have that rise and everyone adoring and then being alone. And I actually had a friend, Lindsay Morgan, on the show, an actress, and we were talking about how on movie sets they should have therapy. Like for anything, because you're just in the spotlight. And even with Tone It Up, like we're like on stage, like hours of meet and greets and this and that. And, you know, it's a lot of pressure on you. And I think for reality shows, I just started watching Love Island. The last season, it was really good. just throwing that out there. I binged it. But yeah, but that's a lot of pressure. Like then, because you're like, well, then what? So there's got to be a way to get, actually, I think now they do have therapists on set.
Yeah, they tend to have it before, and then they have them on site, on set, but it's the after part. So once you're released from the show or the experience, what actually is the protocol? Because what we're seeing is a decline in people's mental health, whatever that looks like. We're talking about suicide prevention, but what does it really look like? Do you have a friend who you're noticing is drinking more alcohol than usual? Do you have a friend who you're noticing is maybe not coming to the lunches or the dinners or the social events, and they're kind of retreating and they're isolating themselves? These are some of the warning signs. Maybe you see someone or you hear them talking about they're not just enjoying life as much as they could. When you catch it early, there's stuff that we can do. It's super hard when it gets too late. And I think what I've learned is that it's the small steps that we get to take daily that compound over time. And it doesn't have to be something that is heavy and hard. I find myself apologizing sometimes to my friends. I'm like, I just want to check in. Like, are you guys all right with me talking about this all of the time? Because it's my career and it's my life. And I understand it's also not necessarily dinner table conversation for everyone, but in my friendship group now it is. And they're like, no, Nick, we love it because it's real. And we feel like that as well sometimes. And even though we are happy on social media, this and this and this and this is going on in our lives.
Yeah.
And you realize what's personal is universal, and everyone has their own version of hard.
Yeah. So on that note too, when I have printed out from your book, 21 Ways You Can Hold Space. And it reminded me of a time when Bobby and I, there was actually now a friend, but someone I knew through work on social media. Never met them in real life, but all of a sudden one day they were posting about suicide. And I immediately reached out over DM. He lived like 2 blocks away. I said, hey, we've never met in person, and we're down the street today. Would you come over for dinner? And he said yes. And he came over for dinner. And I'm like, I called Bobby. I'm like, I know we've never met him, but I feel like he's posting some signals. And Bobby's like, yes, let's have him over.
Chills.
Like, it's those little things that you just have to be aware. Invite someone over for dinner. If they're alone, invite someone for a walk. Like some of your, commit to making at least one call a day. Let someone just know that you're there. Meet for coffee. All these simple little things. If you feel someone is detaching.
And it can feel like it's like sometimes the opposite that you want to do. I'm an introvert, so I really love my own time and space.
Same. Yeah.
But it's actually also not the healthiest thing. And I had friends come and stay with me. And I remember thinking, oh, it's going to be so many people in my space and I don't know how this is going to go. It was the best thing because I didn't realize how much I needed that pick-me-up of having people in my space. Just, good morning, amazing, how are you? Da-da-da. Like, it wasn't a lot. It was nothing really specific. It was just the energy of humanity and that connection that can really lift us all up.
Well, as we know, we're in the isolation epidemic. And I'm an introvert as well. And I know you invited me out for dinner. I'm like, nah, I'm good. But I'm good. Thank you, though. But I just got done with like a massive toned up shoot.
I get
managing
it. Do not
20
worry.
plus people. I'm like, this is where I stay by myself.
Yeah.
But I'm good. But I might come out one night. But I think it's just so important to just, if you have that little inkling, just to reach out. Because even for me, because I can go like super deep into introverting. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this and go to dinner. I have the best time of my life.
Yeah, that's the thing. And you can go and you remember, okay, actually, you know what? This feels good. So the next time I feel the resistance, I have to really check in with myself. What is it that I really need?
Yeah.
Do I need the space and the time, or might I actually feel better by getting connected with more people?
Yeah.
And then it's also, what does that look like? Do you want to go to the event with 100 people there, or do you want to drop in one-on-one with someone?
Yeah.
What is it you really need to feel good?
Yeah. So, in your book, I open it up to the page of splashing cold water on your face, a quiet place, ceremony music. But Kundalini meditation, that was the first, when I was in my 20s and I was having psoriasis and went to a doctor and she prescribed me yoga and I went to Kundalini. So talk about that.
What a great prescription.
I know,
Who
right?
is that doctor?
A free clinic in LA when I'm like super young with no money. And she's like, get sunlight and yoga.
Amazing. What a great prescription.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been practicing Kundalini for 11 years.
Yeah.
And I honestly say it's the best thing that I've ever done for my business, for my health, for my nervous system, for everything. It's like it's a power tool.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly strange if you've never done it before.
Yeah.
I love it for the voice activation because there's a lot of chanting involved and a lot of breath work. And it just touches on so many of the power points of moving your body, of connecting with your breath, remembering that when you take that breath, you can choose again. You can choose and you'll feel a little bit better. It's your meditation. It's more self-awareness.
Yeah.
It's processing traumas without you actually needing to even go there. It's kind of moving things through your body without you even realizing.
Yeah. So for you, how is your mental health these days? Like what?
I'm feeling great. I'm feeling way better than I was feeling over the last few years. And thank you for asking as well. You know what a great question. I also love to check in on a daily basis with my friends. So instead of the normal response of, oh, like I am great and I'm doing well, it's like, okay, well, how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? It's like, okay, cool. And why? Like comparatively to how I used to feel, 10 out of 10, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really went through it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that it's never going to touch us again.
Yeah.
There's times where I feel tired or I have brain fog. I also have ADHD. So the stuff that comes up and through with that as well. But generally, really good, really grateful, very fulfilled, and just loving that I get to live one more day.
Yeah.
Grateful for that.
Yeah. I love that one more day. So I was just having a conversation with my sister this morning because I turned 43 years ago. Bobby's birthday is today.
Is it?
He's
You
40.
kept that one quiet.
He did. He's a little grumpy. Like, it's okay. It's a big number. But I was just talking about that, like when I turned 40, I was like so excited that I was here in one more day and I get to experience this life and all of the darkness and everything that has been there. Like to be able to live one more day is so important. So the message that you're spreading is really good. But I want to ask you about survivor's guilt because that's a big thing. And speaking of Bobby, he had a friend named Chris when he was in high school that died by suicide. And it still affects him. It still comes up. So let's talk about that for those who need to understand survivor's guilt and releasing that.
I think something that really has helped me to process those more dense emotions is recognizing the love that comes through within it. And it was interesting when I was writing One More Day, one of the editors that we were working with, she tragically lost her niece during the writing of the book. And we had a Google Doc that we were working into, and she was writing these comments, and she was like, Nick, this is really helping me right now to remember that grief is love. So I think there's something in that. And for me, what has really helped is finding so much meaning and purpose through the journey. And I've really been able to transform that pain into purpose. I felt like for a long time, I had a lot of questions around why my friends were such strong supporters of me and also of positive psychology, and now they're not here anymore. I also have channeled some of the anger into things like running my first marathon and doing something that actually moves the energy through your body. But just knowing that sometimes you don't have all of the answers, and that's okay. Sometimes it's good to sit in the question and then just let that go. Like surrender to the process and be grateful for our path and our purpose in this lifetime. And knowing that there are things that we can do to take the experience that we've had and create something more positive because of it.
So on page 160, finding reasons to live. See the sunrise. Love that.
That's a vibe.
That's a vibe. Discover your purpose. What's your purpose?
My purpose is to help the world become more mentally healthy.
Same.
Yes.
And it feels good. Like even there's no shame about your mental health game. Like we're just sharing it because for myself too, then you open up more stories and people share, and that's so healing.
It's an adventure. And also I just want to acknowledge we would not have met unless it was for these losses.
Yeah. You can make new friends that way. I've connected with so many people because I would even say through the friend Amber we met, I remember hiking with her and she had a similar story growing up with her parents. I'm like, oh, when you start talking more, you realize how many people actually share a very similar story. And it makes me go back to high school when I was rebellious and had my decade of darkness and raving and drugs and escaping everything. But then now, since I'm in this work, I'm like, what about the other hundreds of kids that were in that room doing the same thing? What is their story? And who has survived? Because I know many of them haven't. And we never talked about it. We were just there like letting go. Stare at the stars. I love that. Overcome a fear. What have you overcome as a fear?
A fear of speaking.
Oh, my
You
God.
would never believe it.
The introverts here on stage in front of thousands. No.
Yeah, I used to be really, really terrified of it, but it's almost like I lent into that. So I was like, this is not going to stop me. And now it's one of my favorite things to do.
Orgasms you listed.
Yeah, I think that's in there quite a few times.
Sing your favorite song loudly. What's your favorite song?
I love Unstoppable by Sia. And I also love Glorious by Macklemore. So Glorious is my word of the year.
Glorious. I love that. I love that. Okay, so aside from this, what is your life like? You're putting out the mission of one more day and that your life is worth it and mental health advocacy. Aside from that, what is Nick up to around the world?
I'm loving being on the tour and just connecting with so many people for this message, doing the TV and things like that. I'm also writing another book already.
Already?
Yeah. So I'm writing a book called Unstoppable Success.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first one was Positive Psychology for Happiness. The second one, Positive Psychology for Mental Health. And then the third is Positive Psychology for Business and Success.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school in the UK. So I did Northumbria University, then Leeds University, and then UEL in London. So I have 3 degrees like the band.
So what made you want to get a degree in psychology? I mean, I can guess.
I didn't originally. I used to want to be an automotive engineer and work in Formula One.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So I got scholarships to study that at university. But then my ex-boyfriend, who was a professional athlete, he was seeing a sports psychologist, and he came home and he told me this story. He said, Nick, the psychologist said to me, like, visualize what you want. And when you close your eyes and you look at the field inside of your mind, don't look at the fielders, but look for where you want the ball to go instead, and look for the gaps in between the fielders. So it was that one conversation that meant I cancelled my engineering degrees. And I'd never studied psychology before, but I had that intuitive gut feeling that this was a direction that I needed to go in. So I went through a process in the UK called clearing and ended up doing sports science with psychology, and then doing a master's in positive psychology from there.
Okay. Well, in honor of, we're recording this on F1 weekend in Austin.
Oh, yeah.
So have you been an F1 fan for?
I have, yeah. I grew up, my dad and brother and I used to watch it every Sunday. We used to get the morning papers, make sandwiches, and sit and watch the race. I went to my first race last year.
Where at? Which one?
In Vegas.
Oh, I was there.
Were
The first
you?
Vegas one, yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
That is wild. And you know what's really special? I finished the first draft of the book the night of qualifying.
Yeah.
And I went there with 12 of my guy friends, and they're like calling me like, Nick, hurry up, like we're going. And I said, I'm sending this book off. I'm not hurrying. So I finally got there. And they were like, what's this book about anyway? And I said, it's suicide prevention. And you could kind of see some of them bristle and be like, well, she's a weirdo. But by the end of the night, so many drop-ins with those guys who now had a space to open up and be vulnerable. And they were sharing, you know what, I felt like that. And what got me through was social media. And I saw this quote that said this thing. So I just think that it is such a powerful opening to start to talk about these things. And I'm loving seeing how many men are open to the conversation as well.
Yeah. Max or Lewis?
Oh my God, Lewis.
Okay.
Because I'm like, I'm old school. That's why. I'm 37. Yeah. And Lewis has spoken out about his mental health.
Oh my gosh. We need to manifest Lewis somehow.
Yeah.
Just talking with us.
I feel like we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so this is a F1 story like 2 years ago. So we would have a trackside spot with our RV, and friends would all come there. And Amber came and she's like, who do you want to win? And I was like, Lewis. She's like, okay, let's do a ceremony. Of course.
Formula One ceremony, the best.
He didn't win, but we tried.
I feel like we can manifest Lewis.
We're going to manifest.
It's like happening.
Lewis. Yeah. Yeah, he's amazing. So what else? Where can people find you? Where? And you were doing an event in LA? Yeah.
I'm going to do one in Austin as well.
Okay.
So book launch event coming to a city near you.
Yes.
And then online, my favorite place to hang out is Instagram. Love a voice note with my dodgy accent.
Yes.
And then the book is at onemoredaybook.com.
I love it. Anything else you want to share for finding strength and resilience through your darkest times?
I think just like really echoing your willingness to have this conversation and what you're doing here with the big silence. I feel like we get to be in celebration of that and be in celebration of life.
Yeah.
Whilst the context is dark and heavy, really what we're looking for is how can we feel better more of the time?
I agree with that. It doesn't have to be dark and heavy. It's not. It is a conversation that I guarantee everyone is feeling something at some time. So reach out to Nick, reach out to me. We have resources. We have a Therapy for All program here where we pay for your therapy. So
amazing.
Yes.
We got you.
We got you. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
The big silence. The big silence.